Dalí Museum, St. Petersburg. But as you can see, there are palm trees, so it's not St. Petersburg, Russia, but St. Petersburg, Florida. And let's go in. Let's have a look what they have inside. Right after you get inside the museum, there is a gift shop. So if you want to buy some reproductions, here is your chance. And of course they don't sell originals, but Dalí made a lot of lithographs that sell for original ones, of course, that sell for thousands of dollars. But there are many fakes, so be aware if you do decide to buy something. The most expensive painting sold at auction in 2011 was the portrait of French poet Paul Éluard. There is an interesting connection here. Paul Éluard was ex-husband of Dalí's wife. By the way, that portrait of Paul Éluard sold for over $22 million or something like that. So when you think about Florida, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Beaches? Okay. What is the second thing? Also beaches. What is next? Maybe Disney World and Magic Kingdom in Orlando? Okay, fair enough. What is the third thing? Nice weather, at least in winter? Okay. But would you think about museum or museums in Florida? No, I wouldn't think so either. Even though Florida has some fine museums, who would think that there would be a museum dedicated to a Spanish artist in Florida? And yet there is one, as you see. I am not an art critic, so I will show you what I saw in the museum, but I will not comment on any particular work or works. It is all, in my opinion, in the eye of the beholder. You either like it or don't like it, and that's it. And I liked Salvador Dalí painting since I was a teenager. Somehow they fascinated me when I saw them in magazines. And the second little story I will tell you is how on earth a museum dedicated to Salvador Dalí ended up in St. Petersburg, Florida. And there is one other Salvador Dalí museum which is in Spain, in Figueres, Catalonia, where he was born. Funny enough, about 20-25 years ago I drove through Figueres and I was ignorant. I had no idea, so I missed the museum there. His best known work is called The Persistence of Memory, and it's one of the most famous surrealist paintings. And Dalí lived in France throughout the Spanish Civil War, and then he left for the United States in 1940, where he achieved commercial success. And he returned to Spain in 1948. His work included paintings, graphic arts, film, sculpture, design, and photography. And at times he collaborated with other artists. He also wrote fiction, poetry, essays, and so on. To the dismay of those who held his work in high regard and to the irritation of his critics, his eccentric and strange at times public behavior often drew more attention than his artwork, and his commercial activities and the quality and authenticity of some of his late works also have been controversial. His life and work were an important influence on other surrealist pop art and contemporary artists. So I am kind of thinking that he would fit right in to the internet and social media age. Wouldn't you think so? But unfortunately he died in 1989, so he kind of missed on all what's going on in the world today. I mean, with regards to social media and so on. And how did the museum start, and why on earth is it in Florida and in St. Petersburg of all places? Well, in 1942, the Morses, a young couple with money obviously, visited a traveling Dalí retrospective at the Cleveland Museum of Art and became fascinated with the artist's work. In 1943, the Morses bought their first Dalí painting. Daddy Longlegs of the Evening Hope was the name. This was the first of many acquisitions which would culminate 40 years later in the preeminent collection of Dalí's work in America. In 1943, the Morses met Salvador Dalí and his wife Gala in New York, and that's how their friendship actually started. From 71 to 80, the Morses' considerable Dalí collection was on show in Beechwood, Ohio, at the Salvador Dalí Museum, which was established there in a wing of their business premises. During that time, the collection grew and required larger accommodation. The Morses began the search for a new permanent home for their collection. After seeing an article in the Wall Street Journal, U.S. Art War, the Dalí over Dalí, St. Petersburg attorney James Martin persuaded local leaders to approach the Morses to choose St. Petersburg. With the financial support of the city of St. Petersburg and the state of Florida, the collection was housed in the Salvador Dalí Museum, formerly a warehouse on the waterfront, which opened in 1982. A new, larger and more storm-secure museum opened on January 11, 2011 at 11:11 a.m. So if you just look at the numbers, 1, 11, 11 at 11:11. Funny, isn't it? Probably in the spirit of Salvador Dalí himself, I would guess. Dalí's work is housed in a museum that itself is a work of art. Designed by noted architect Jan Weymouth, the museum features a geodesic structure that's asymmetrical and would be right at home in Dalí's fantasy world. It seems to ooze out of the building very much like Dalí's paintings. Inside there is a very unique spiral staircase that actually was made in place, almost a sculpture. And it's a reference to Dalí's obsession with spirals. Dalí was one of the first artists to be inspired by the structure of the DNA molecule. There is a lot of spirals that show up in his paintings, and we have been able to pay tribute to that with the spiral staircase holding the whole building together, uniting it and bringing our guests up to the third floor where the collection is, the museum curator said. And I think those are fitting words, aren't they? So I think I am the end of today's video. I hope you liked it, and thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.